Hi, today we're going to talk about the difference between American and British English, right? And to get us started, we're going to have a look at the definition forgotten, which is a typically American word for which Oxford has no comment, right? Just participle of get, and you may associate it with ill-gotten, right? Whereas Oxford Lexico powered by Oxford will have a usage note explaining how we use gotten in American English and not in British English, right? And it says in North American English, gotten are not identical. Gotten usually implies the process of obtaining something, as in he had gotten us tickets for the show, while he got implies the state of possession or ownership. So the difference between obtain and possess. Please note that somehow when they restarted this site, they forgot to use italics for examples, right? For sample sentences. All right. And then on a funnier note from the book The Prodigal Tongue, Tongue by I forget her name, by Lynn Murphy, right? She tells us a very funny joke. An impatient American approaches a London hotel reception desk demanding to know where the elevator is. The receptionist replies, "I think you mean the lift, which is just to your right there." The American doesn't take well to being corrected. "I'm from Chicago, and we invented the damn things. They are elevators." The receptionist replies, "Yes, of course, sir, but we invented the language," which makes us see how English speakers might be tempted to say something like things like intrusive Americanisms, vulgar Americanisms, unwanted or even witless Americanisms, right? Of course, American and British English interact quite normally until there is a bit of a difference, right? And today that's what we're going to talk about. Before we get into the specifics, I wanted to comment on some expressions I got from certain lists that you will find everywhere online. And this is one of the top 10 and most annoying Americanisms. And I'm going to choose just a couple from here, like do the math. Americans say do the math all the time to mean, well, you work it out. But this says that this should be translated as you work it out yourself, stupid. Remember that math without the final S is American English. With an S, it is British English. Another typical expression in American English is with good luck with that, for which the translation is you have no chance at all. And finally, Americans tend to say a lot, not so much, when they actually mean you're absolutely wrong. All right, so let's get into the specifics, as I said, and we're going to discuss from Fowler this question of gotten, right? Actually, what Birchfield has to say. The first thing he has to say is that we seem to have become accustomed to this informal, verging on the non-standard expression, which is to get to do something, right? One of the horrible Americanisms, he doesn't say that, but it seems to be trying to assert that. So I got to sit in front, I got to live there, I got to stay, and whatnot. This is very normal in English, and I wouldn't waste 2 seconds thinking about it, right? And then he goes on to explain what I just read from about gotten from Lexico, right? This idea of obtaining, right, as opposed to get, meaning owning or possessing, right? He gives you plenty of examples, and towards the end he comments that it is surprising because in English other expressions with gotten tend to exist quite normally, right? Like begotten, which is rather biblical, right? Which is the past of the verb beget, but we use it in an expression, right? Violence begets violence, as in it brings about, right? And it also he speaks about, well, ill-gotten, right, which is a form that we use very frequently with money, right? Ill-gotten money, because it means to obtain unfairly or dishonestly. And of course, forgotten, which is a very well-known word for you. Now, the next point we're going to discuss is the OUR ending, right? And for this, usually the general idea is that the OUR difference, and OR is American, OUR is British English. Now, in Birchfield's entry, remember you will find two entries, one for OUR in final position and the other one for OUR or OR in mid position. And what he explains to us is something that most people forget, which is that, yes, it is true that many words like behavior, candor, color, harbor, honor, labor, neighbor, parlor, splendor, and valor, which are spelled, I'm going to use just the last one, right? OUR in British English and OR in American English. But he says there are many words that take only OR in English, in both in American and British English. By the way, we tend to speak of a word's distribution, and that means how it is used in different regions, right? When we refer to regional differences of English. And sometimes people don't want to speak about dialects because the difference is quite strong, right? So what are these words? Or which are these words? Well, mainly abstract nouns like error, horror, pallor, stupor, terror, torpor, and tremor. I'm going to go only for the last one, which only have one variant, right? Remember the word I'm using, variant. That is to say, and the pronunciation variant in British English, right? Which is no difference in British or American English. There are also agent nouns like the ones you know: actor, governor, orator, sailor, orator. And there are just a list of miscellaneous words like ambassador, anchor, bachelor, emperor, liquor, mirror, and matador, which is not one we use. But then he says we do have contour, right? And that's how we say it, and there's only that one. And paramour, right? Which is also spelled only with OU. So what this entry should show you basically is that while there is a tendency for OUR to be used only in British English, American English also has many words that end in OR, particularly when we speak about abstract nouns, agent nouns, and the miscellaneous words that I mentioned, right? The same applies to the words, whether they are in mid position, right? And well, one of the examples would be well, this is clamorous, right, or humorous, right, the ending. But honorable, if you look up honorable in American English, they will say that they will not use the U, right, in British, in Merriam-Webster. Okay, but let's look at these adjectives. Fabulous. Only one styling, right? It's OUS. Disastrous. Anonymous. Adventurous. Right? Only one styling. We cannot style these words with only O, right? Because these are adjectives, and that's another variation, right? Adjectives will not end in OR, right? Sorry, or so this is for the ending OUS, right? Okay, let's move on now. We are going to move on to the ISE ending, right? And there's a couple of things I would like to first start with the entry on page 422, right? ISE in verbs. And he's going to tell us, Birchfield's going to tell us that there are many words that always take S, right? Which is actually what entry on page 419 was telling us. There are many words that end in ISE in both varieties of English. So we have despise, supervise, and revise, and disguise, enterprise, exercise, surmise, surprise, improvise, televise, and I think I'm done. So what happened with these words? And actually, I'm going to page 419, and the reason for these endings in ISE in both regional varieties of English is that these words came to English through French, right? And that is why they stay with an S, right? Of course, there are many others that can take the spelling with I-Z-E, right? But what Birchfield explains to us is that also the British in Britain, people also use the ending IZE. He says that this is true for Oxford University Press, for the Times, and actually this varies depending on the publication. You may do your searches, but there are many publications that stick to the ISE ending, and many others that have decided to take the IZE ending, right? Which is something that Americans started many years ago. Well, and it's actually to reflect pronunciation, right? Because the pronunciation is always the same, right? And where I wanted to go now is to single out some comments that Birchfield makes having to do with how many words are turned into verbs by adding ISE or IZE, right? And some of the examples here sound really far-fetched, like couponize, disasterize, keyboardize, nuggetize, but some others feel very normal, like strategize and weaponize, right? So he says one must be careful not to give the thumbs down to words simply because one has not encountered them before, right? So it seems that it's a question of getting accustomed to what to certain words, right? And once they become part of the language, we forget that they are new. And he ends the entry with his verdict, right? The language has a large number of established words ending in ization and eyes, but the arrival of new words of this type continues at a rate that, rightly or wrongly, makes many fastidious users, false friends, right, picky users of the language uneasy. Some of the 20th century newcomers will drop by the wayside, meaning that there will be, this is a very nice expression, right, will somehow will be forgotten, right? Others will survive into the 21st century, our century, and beyond, right? To fall by the wayside, he uses the collocation drop by the wayside, to fail, to be unable to make progress, right? And he wraps it up by saying the creasing of brows about them will continue, right? So people will continue to feel uneasy about new words, and this happens all the time, right? Okay, that's about it for the IZE, ISE ending. So far we have covered got, gotten, OUR, IZE, ISE. And now we're going to go to Swan. So we're dropping Birchfield, and we go back to Swan, entry 51, about British and American English, right? And there's another expression typically used to refer to Americanisms entering British English, which is unwanted, right? Unwanted. Of course, it's unwanted, right? And I think I told you with less. being basically stupid, right? All right, typical quotes that have been said regarding Americanisms, one by very well known by Oscar Wilde. We have everything in common with Americans nowadays, except of course the language, right? Um, but well, as regards the differences explained here in grammar, I would not really worry about this, but mostly I would say that in most cases when we use a present perfect in American English, on many occasions in spoken American English, you will drop the have form and you will say, as it says here, he just went home, right? But in most cases, I would say that another great difference is that Americans have dropped the use of present perfect in many cases, not always, and simply use a simple past, right? Though we cannot say that British English speakers do not do the same thing, right? Another important difference has to do with agreement with collective nouns. And this is very interesting because I could swear, I know this is true, but words like family can have singular or plural agreement. And they used to be my family is, are, and now they don't have it anymore, but they do have it for government, right? Government is, or sorry, has or have says here, somewhere here. Let me find it. The government has or have been considering, right? Another typical word in this group is team. The team has one or the team have one. Many grammarians say there's a tendency in British English to treat these words as plural, right? But here notice that it says North American English, whose team are you on? No, sorry. I didn't mean that. This is just an expression in British or American English. I forget whether there was a reference. No, they have tried quite effectively to avoid using either singular or plural agreement, right? So the examples mostly include team as, oh, see, sorry, here, the team is are, and they do not say whether this is American or British. So as I was saying, some grammarians say that plural agreement is rather frequent in British English rather than in American English, right? Particularly for these words. What matters is that if you use plural agreement, you see the collective noun as a unit, whereas if you use plural agreement, you see the collective noun as a being made up of many members, right? And that's why you have this singular agreement to identify every single member of the group, right? Okay. I'm not interested in going to the details of other grammatical differences between British or American, right? As regards vocabulary, well, the list is endless, right? So I don't think this merits our attention because I know you know many of these. I strongly recommend that you go through the choices because they still hold today, although this book may be, well, a new edition was published not many years ago. So, but maybe one that I would single out would be the doctor's office in American English, British English, that is surgery. The question of floors, first floor in American English becomes ground floor in British English, and maybe railroad in American English and railway in British English. Another one that I really like a lot is rise and raise. It's a very problematic, the words are problematic in themselves, but actually rise as a noun, so we need to go here, and what happens here? Yes, you ask for a pay rise in British English, but a pay raise in American English. Well, I think others are not that interesting, but of course they may be of interest to you, right? There are many expressions, right, that vary in British and American English, and there's lots and lots and lots of idioms, but maybe well, in American English, sorry, in British English, you speak of autocue, but the American version is teleprompter, right? In British English, you play truant. In American English, you play hooky. Um, what else? In British English, gently does it. In American English, easy does it. You count heads in British English, but noses in American English. To all intents and purposes, we saw it just recently, but for all intents and purposes in American English. One that I like is to be into minds in British English, to be of two minds in American English. The lie of the hand. This is a very beautiful idiom. You need to know the lie of the hand, como viene la mano. But American English, it's the lay of the hand. That's unfair. Why? Let me just check this. Well, you need to check the noun. I should have checked earlier, right? Yeah, the lie of the hand, the lay of the hand in American English, right? Okay, plain sailing in British English, clear sailing in American English, highly strung in British English, high strung in American English, home from home in British English, home away from home in American English. The list is endless, right? I was reading from one of my favorite lists. As regards prepositions, there's also differences, right? You're in a team in British English, on a team in American English, on the weekend in American English, at the weekend in British English, possibly one you were familiar with. Okay. There are many differences in spelling, right? And here I would like to take a minute because in some cases I know you know some that are popular, like Czech, CK, American English, Q, U, E in British English, right? Or Kala, as we mentioned, with O in American English, O-U-R in British English. But what about defense? Many words that end in SE in American English go with CE in the noun in British English, right? For that, one big difference is practice as a verb. How do you know? Through pronunciation, right? Practice. Oh, sorry, my bad. Practice. But the spelling in American English is practice with a C, right? Another difference that you may not know is that in most cases, what happens in American English is that we simplify the spelling, right? So many consonants are duplicated, are no longer duplicated in American English, like traveling. Right? Traveling, right? American English will spell it only with one L. But there are many other words that actually contradict this rule, and one of them is enroll. That is the American spelling, right? Right? Enrollment, only one L in British English. And the same goes with fulfillment. Right? I'm chastised by the dictionary. Fulfillment, only one L in British English, two L's in American English. Now, look at this. Skillful. American English, sorry, British English, only one L here, but American takes double L here. And what happens with, forget, willful? Did I tell you willful? Willful, British English, only one L, right? Another, jewelry. Well, this is the British spelling, right? Sorry, yes, double L is the one that is British, and the simplified spelling is American English. With notice that we drop one L and one E in this case. But going back to the previous case, what I wanted to show you is that there are very few cases in which actually there's a consonant that has been duplicated in American English, right? There are many other words for which you can check the spelling here. There's another set that is not here. Here, pediatrician, right? This AE, a digraph, right? Or also called ligature, right? Pediatrician. in American English, this becomes pediatrician, only one E. That's the same happens in encyclopedia, right? Only one E in American English. Okay, so as you can imagine, there are many other words, right, for which the spelling varies. Now, there are many other words for which the pronunciation changes, right? So Z, for example, the letter, right, will be Z in American English and Z in British English, right? Z, British English, Z, American English. Though this is a tendency, right? Of course, you know that that this doesn't mean that a British speaker will not use an American pronunciation, will not use American pronunciation and the other way around, right? Of course. But let me check some of the words that I think are interesting in its difference, right? This is one that I think is very useful, right? Caribbean, yes, in British English. Typically Caribbean in American English, though it is included as a British pronunciation, right? Then there's Renaissance and Renaissance. And this brings me to the pronunciation of words of French origin. The British people will try to anglicize those words and say crochet, but Americans will retain French stress and say crochet, right? There's one word that I would like you to check. Maybe you know lieutenant, but lieutenant is American English, lieutenant is British English, right? Sorry, there are these words. Advertisement, British English, advertisement, American English, right? And this, I don't know if you know this, but many words similar to this one. Administrative, British English, administrative, American English, right? And look at this one. Legislative, but legislative, right? So these endings, right, sort of bring about a difference in pronunciation, basically because they can have double stress, right? But of course you will check this with your phonology teacher. This word, maybe you don't know. It is apricot in British English, but apricot in American English. Oops, I missed the N. Thank you. Meanwhile, you can think about how you pronounce it. Clandestine British English, right? Clandestine, mostly American English. So you can see that it is for both variants, right? Look at this. A respite in American English, respite in British English. Inherent, right, is the typically American, actually, yes, but the pronunciation originally was inherent, right? Okay, let me go to another set of words like this one. Vitamin or vitamin. Italic, this is not registered here, but Americans also say italic. Idyllic or idyllic. Now, there's a tendency in American English to use a diphthong in a non-stressed I, right? Oh, yes, sorry, I misspelled it. Look at this. Vivacious, but Americans also go vivacious. And this is specifically, though the first one I think I gave you was vitamin, that was initial stress, but when the I was stressed, but when the I is not stressed, they will use diphthong. There are differences with certain verbs. For example, bathe. Yes, but there's another verb which is to bath. British English bath was there, right, as a verb. Have you bathed the baby, right? He never bathed. And the pronunciation is with ah, right? Okay. Let me see if there's something else I want to single out about pronunciation. Well, there's so many words that we think are pronounced equally. Peer and peer, right? Diaper, right? Diaper. Well, there was a difference in the choice of word, not the pronunciation, right? Okay, I think I have nothing more. There was something else I wanted to say about pronunciation. Well, this appears in another video, in the video on uses of English, right, and actually homophones. But remember, we had this difference with missile, missile, and fertile and fertile, right? Okay, and that seems about it. Okay, so that's the end of British and American English. I hope you have enjoyed it. Bye.